This isn't your typical scary story, but trust me, it's worth hearing. I was about 2 years out of undergrad when everything began. Technically, I was enrolled in an online graduate certificate at the same school where I got my bachelor's, but I still had more free time than I knew what to do with. During that chapter of my life, I bounced from odd job to odd job, taking anything that filled the hours and stacked some cash. Indeed was basically my best friend. I swear 90% of my leads came from that site. I was burned out from door dashing around the same 6 neighborhoods for what felt like pennies, so I needed a change, something different. That night, while scrolling, I found something interesting. A private lifeguarding job at a hotel a few towns over. Innocent enough on the surface, but the listing had details that raised every red flag in my brain. First off, the hours were backward, completely reversed. The hotel wanted someone to supervise a pool from 5 p.m. to 1 a.m., a night shift for a pool. But that wasn't the strangest part. The listing specifically asked for someone who did not speak Spanish. Yeah, they wanted a lifeguard who couldn't understand Spanish. That was a problem because I've been speaking Spanish since childhood. I'm literally half Mexican, and the town this hotel was in, mostly Spanish-speaking Americans. Nothing about the requirement made sense. Nothing about the entire listing made sense. But the pay, $30 an hour, was impossible to ignore. Back then, that felt like accidentally kicking a gold brick under your bed. So I decided to not know Spanish for a while. What were they going to do, test me? Apparently yes, because I was invited to interview just a few hours later. Fast forward to the first day. I pull up to the hotel. Totally normal-looking place. A pudgy Mexican-looking guy walks out to greet me. Friendly, laughing, nice. His good attitude calmed me down a bit. But then a taller guy turned the corner and locked eyes with me in a way that made my stomach twist. He walked right up to me and started speaking Spanish. No smile, no handshake, just staring into my face and rambling about the weather. He was testing me. He wanted to see if I understood him. I played dumb, kept my face blank, even though I understood every word. After an awkward silence, the first guy translated for me. Then both of them burst into laughter like it was some kind of prank. The tall guy finally shook my hand and introduced himself as Heath, and the pudgy guy was Esteban. We walked through the hotel, and Heath explained the job. They wanted someone on late shifts because they planned to increase revenue by allowing non-guests to use the pool for a fee. I didn't know if that was even legal, but hey, $30 an hour. The Spanish thing? According to Heath, it would prevent rowdy outsiders from harassing me. That explanation didn't make sense, but I pretended it did. My responsibilities were simple. Lifeguard. Collect money from non-guests. Call Heath if there was any kind of problem. And let anyone with a blue wristband into a huge building behind the stand they called the pool house. I didn't ask questions. The first few weeks were surprisingly normal. Busy, sure, but harmless. People swam, paid, left. No issues. And nobody showed a wristband. Until one random day, maybe a month in, a muscular Hispanic guy in a white button-down walked up to me. Didn't speak a word of English, flashed a blue wristband, and waited. I unlocked the pool house. He walked in. An hour later, he came out again, his backpack noticeably heavier, and left without saying a word. That became the pattern. More wristbands, more groups, more outsiders using the pool. More money, way more money. People were overpaying me constantly, sometimes by absurd amounts. I called Heath, freaked out, and he brushed it off like it was nothing, then hung up while I was still talking. That's when the truth hit me like a brick. I wasn't lifeguarding a pool. I was standing on top of a crime front. Money laundering, maybe drugs, maybe gambling, maybe something worse happening behind that pool house door. But I couldn't confirm anything safely, and $30 an hour was still blinding me. So I kept the job, foolishly. Soon, the regulars, especially wristband people, got friendly. Too friendly. They learned my name, started tipping me, laughing with me, speaking Spanish openly around me, and I heard enough fragments to know everything I feared was true. Then something unexpected happened. A kid started drowning, and I had to jump in and save him. Nothing glamorous, just a normal rescue. But when I came up, everyone cheered like I had pulled off a miracle. A few minutes later, Heath himself came down to thank me personally. That's when I realized something chilling. The kid I saved was his son. The next day, I arrived at work, and Heath, a stab-in, and several of the wristband men were waiting by the gate with glasses of wine. They toasted me, cheered for me, celebrated me. But then one man said a toast in Spanish. I don't remember it word for word, but it was horrifying. He toasted to all the money they were making and all the lives they were destroying. Everyone laughed. I didn't. That was the moment I realized I was becoming comfortable inside something incredibly dark, addicted to the money, the attention, the praise, and I knew I shouldn't be. Then everything collapsed. The next day, my mom called. She only ever spoke Spanish, so I stepped away and answered. After I hung up and turned around, a stab-in was standing directly in front of me. His face was cold, empty, completely different from the cheerful guy I first met. He asked, "How long have you known Spanish?" I lied. He didn't move. He didn't blink. He just stared into me like he was calculating something, deciding something. I genuinely thought he was going to kill me. After a long silence, he finally said, "Okay," turned around and walked away. I went back to my stand shaking, paralyzed. Leaving early would look suspicious. Staying felt dangerous. I just sat there, waiting for something terrible to happen. Near the end of my shift, he approached me again. Calm. Too calm. He told me to arrive an hour early the next day because he had a new opportunity for me. Then he tipped me a few $100s and walked away. When I left the hotel that night, I never came back. For months afterward, I jumped at every van, every unknown car, every sound outside my window. I barely slept. I kept replaying everything, tried to understand it. Maybe they were running drugs, maybe money laundering, maybe much worse. But the part that still haunts me was how a stab-in looked at me that day. Because in that moment, there was only one thought in his head, and it wasn't kindness. This happened many years ago, and to be honest, I've never been built for camping. I hate the dirt, the bugs, the sleeping bags that somehow feel like rocks by morning. But my dad, he's one of those rugged, nature is pure outdoorsmen. So every summer, he dragged me out into the woods with his equally rugged friends to disconnect from technology and reconnect with nature. By the time I hit sophomore year of high school, I was done suffering in silence. I begged him to at least let me bring a friend, someone to share the misery with. Shockingly, he agreed. So I brought Charles. Now, you'd think Charles would have made the trip worse since he was a former hardcore Boy Scout who loved camping. But surprisingly, he didn't act like one of those, "You're not a real man unless you love the outdoors" people. He teased me, sure, but he kept it cool. And honestly, if I was going to be miserable, at least I'd have someone who knew how to make a fire without nearly burning down the forest. He was excited to come, partly for the camping, but mostly because back then he looked for any excuse to get away from his parents. But the trip got ruined immediately. One of my dad's friends messed up the site reservation. So instead of some remote, peaceful forest, we ended up at the worst kind of overdeveloped campsite. Paved walkways, indoor bathrooms, even a playground for toddlers. It wasn't camping. It was glamping disguised as roughing it. My dad was furious. And then we discovered the cherry on top. Right next to our campsite was an amusement park. A full-on mini carnival with games, a Ferris wheel, and actual roller coasters. It was surreal, like two worlds that should never collide. Everyone was pissed. Charles wouldn't stop repeating, "This isn't real camping," as if any of us needed the reminder. Eventually, I snapped and told him to chill. He did, but the irritation lingered. We couldn't just pack up and go home, though. We'd driven too far, so we made the best of it. The grown-ups grumbled while setting up camp, and Charles jumped in like he was auditioning for an outdoor survival show. He set up our tent perfectly. The knots perfect, the rain fly spotless. Even my dad, who never compliments unless someone is bleeding, gave him a nod of approval. It annoyed me more than I want to admit. Charles and I shared a tent, and after dinner we slipped away under the excuse of organizing gear. In reality, Charles had brought a small metal pipe and some weed hidden in an Altoids tin. We were in that delinquent phase, causing trouble, sneaking around, pretending to be rebellious. I don't smoke anymore, but back then, it made me feel like I stood out. We snuck into the woods, smoked, and laughed like idiots. By the time we came back to the tent, we were buzzing with too much energy to even consider sleeping. Then Charles gave me that grin, the mischievous one, and I knew he was planning something. He wanted to explore, not the campsite, the amusement park. That got my attention immediately. The thought of climbing to the top of a roller coaster? Yeah, we were in. After midnight, once everyone was asleep, we made our move. Flashlights in hand, we headed to the fence. It wasn't even that hard to climb. One boost from Charles and we were inside. The place was dark except for a few dim lights, and security guards patrolled in slow-moving golf carts. It felt like we were inside a stealth video game. We slipped between buildings, ducked behind trash cans, and sprinted across open spots whenever the guards weren't looking. It was exhilarating, terrifying, but exhilarating. When we finally reached the base of the roller coaster, it looked way bigger up close. We found the maintenance stairs and started climbing. The metal rungs clanked softly as we climbed higher and higher. Some parts had no railings at all, which made the whole thing feel dangerously unreal. But when we reached the top, the view was insane. We snapped a single picture, terrified even the shutter sound might give us away, and then started heading back down. We figured we'd pushed our luck enough for one night. The way back through the park felt faster. Maybe the guards were slowing down. Maybe we were just in a rhythm. We were 5 minutes from the fence when a golf cart guard forced us to hide behind Snack Shack. And that's when I saw movement. At first I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. But then Charles tapped my arm. He'd seen it too. About 30 feet away, in the dark between two buildings, someone else was crouching. They weren't a kid. And the worst part, they were staring right at us. My chest tightened. Between the guards and now this guy, the fear was starting to feel heavy. We couldn't move until the guard passed, so we kept watching this crouched stranger. Suddenly, he bolted across a patch of open ground and ran straight through a beam of light from a street lamp. And for a split second, we saw him clearly. A man, tattered clothes, a strange, stiff way of moving, like something was wrong with his body, and smeared across his face. Dark liquid. It looked like blood. Charles and I exchanged a terrified look. The man disappeared into the shadows again, and as soon as the guard passed, we made a silent run for the fence. I checked over my shoulder every few seconds, expecting him to be following us, but he never appeared. We climbed the fence, dropped to the other side, and didn't say a single word on the walk back to the tent. Inside the tent, we just lay there, wide awake, trying to process what we'd seen. The best explanation we could come up with was that he was some homeless guy doing something weird. Not a great explanation, but at the time, it was the only one that felt remotely rational. The next morning felt normal, until a campground staffer came around with an announcement. Someone had been stabbed to death the night before at a lake 4 miles away. The killer was still on the loose. The sheriff's office had warned all nearby parks and campsites. They described him as a disheveled white male in his 30s, shirtless, possibly bleeding. Charles and I instantly made the connection. We had seen him. We had been feet away from the guy who murdered someone hours earlier. We didn't tell my dad. We didn't tell the Rangers. And honestly, I still don't fully know why. Fear, stupidity, panic, maybe all of it. I know people will criticize that, and they're right. If we had spoken up, maybe he would have been caught sooner. Charles and I are still friends. We went to college together. We both built normal lives. But this story, we barely talk about it. Because deep down, we both know how close we came to being part of that murder story. How easily we could have been next. This happened back in October of 2016, right in the middle of that bizarre clown hysteria that took over the news. Creepy clown sightings popping up everywhere. Most were hoaxes, attention seekers, but a few were horrifyingly real. And what happened to me was one of the real ones. I was 16, a junior in high school. I had just finished 7th period, said goodbye to my friends, and jumped onto the 6th train heading uptown. The train was mostly empty, strange, but not impossible. I wasn't paying attention at all. Headphones in, blasting music, probably Drake. And to make myself even more oblivious, I was flipping through cam flashcards on my phone. Basically the perfect definition of unaware. Not the smartest move when you're alone, but I knew the area well enough to feel safe. I was planning to get off at 96th and walk home. Nothing unusual, just another Wednesday. But things went bad fast. We pulled into 96th, and I stood up without thinking, barely even glancing at the station name. I'd taken that train so many times the routine was automatic. Getting on, getting off, it was pure reflex. Head still down, music still pounding in my ears. I walked toward the doors, and the moment they slid open, I noticed something, just barely. In the corner of my vision, something blocking my way. I looked up. A man had stepped directly into the doorway. Only he wasn't a man. He was a clown. Full costume, oversized rainbow pants, a baggy yellow shirt with red suspenders, giant red shoes, thick, smeared white makeup across his face, a bright red nose, blue eyebrows painted way too high, the whole cartoon nightmare. The only thing missing was the wig. I froze where I stood, completely stunned. I'd never been that close to anything so wrong, so out of place. He didn't speak. He didn't step aside. He just stood there, motionless, blocking me from getting off the train. I snapped out of it when I realized I had maybe 5 seconds before the doors closed. I had to move. I tried to squeeze past him, but the instant I brushed his shoulder, he leaned down fast, in one smooth, creepy motion, like he wanted to make sure our faces were inches apart. Before he could grab me, I bolted, and that's when he lunged. I dodged him and ran, and he immediately started chasing me. My heart was hammering. There was no one else around. It was early afternoon, and the 96th Street station was almost dead. I was completely alone with a killer clown behind me. I looked back for a second, and what I saw made it worse. His stride was wrong. His limbs moved in this jerky, off-balance way, like his joints didn't line up correctly. But then I saw what he had in his hand. A knife. A kitchen knife. I didn't know where he'd been hiding it or what he wanted, but none of that mattered. I just ran. Up the stairs. Out of the station. Straight into the street. I reported it to the police immediately. He didn't follow me outside, but I was shaking. The cops went down to check, but by the time they got there, he was gone. Completely vanished. Even after they told me I was safe, I couldn't shake the thought. This irrational fear that he knew where I lived, that he'd track me down. Obviously, he didn't. Nothing else ever happened. Maybe my story ended up somewhere among the countless clown sightings of 2016. I honestly don't know. But it took me weeks to recover. Weeks before my heart stopped jumping every time I saw someone standing still in a doorway.